In this recording, what we're going to try to do is to piece together circumstantial evidence, documents that have already been released by NASA, news events that we saw that were reported in the news. We're going to piece all that together, including also things that some of my sources on the ground saw. We're going to piece all that together and try and backtrack, go back, and try and figure out exactly how these elections were fiddled with, what happened, exactly how it was done. Okay. Now, before I go into it, I would advise you, if you're a Jubilee supporter, to click away from this video and go and find another video that will make your heart happy to watch. Okay. Because in our country, what we have come to a place whereby anything that is against your candidate is fake news, is cooked story, is poor research, is propaganda, and anything that favors your opponent, no matter how ridiculous, is a very factual, well-researched story. That's what we've written in this country. Therefore, I'd advise, if you're a Jubilee supporter, kindly, because I don't want to spoil your afternoon, I don't want to spoil your day, click away and go to and view another particular video. Now, I would also like to issue another disclaimer to NASA people. We agreed very early in this channel that we're not going to take things emotional. We're trying to engage our gray matter here, our brains, not our hearts, to find out exactly what happened. We're going to analyze it very coldly, and as factually as we possibly can, to try and piece together what happened on that fateful August 8th, 2017. Now, according to information that is now in the public domain, the IEBC servers were first accessed at around noon on August 8th. That's voting was already underway in most parts, in fact virtually everywhere in the country. And obviously, whoever accessed this server, this was the right time to set things in motion so that the results would be interfered with. Now, the big surprise here is that somebody actually logged in as Chris Musando, the late Chris Musando. Now, this is explosive. I hope you try and realize what this means. Okay? But let me just break it down for you. Chris Musando disappeared, and then he was found murdered very brutally. Something else about Chris Musando: he was found having been tortured. Okay? Now, put those facts together, and then now we are at the IBC server, and somebody is logging in as Chris Musando. It is impossible not to link the two events. Meaning that if somebody was investigating the murder of Chris Musando, this would be a key clue, to solving his very brutal murder. And it's rather obvious. Now, we have had very many political assassinations in this country, and the only political assassination I can remember in the history of Kenya that has had evidence of torture was that of J.M. Kariuki in 1975. But here is what was obviously an assassination, because it cannot be linked directly to the elections that we've just gone through, and torture was being used. And then not only that, after the torture was used, somebody logs in into the IBC server logging in as the late Chris Musando. Wow. That's all I can say. Wow. Now, after this, anyway, let's leave the Musando murder. But even maybe before we go away from that, something else interesting to point us in the direction of those responsible for the murder of Chris Musando was a very curious story that appeared in the press sometime last week, whereby it was reported that some people had been arrested by the Ugandan police who are linked to the Sandow murder. Now, you imagine you're a policeman in a neighboring country like Uganda. What would you know about what is happening in Kenya? I mean, a policeman in his jurisdiction has so much going on, he has no time to find out what's happening in the neighbor. And not only that, were these particular suspects, when they were stopped, did they have it written on their head? Did they have it written on their foreheads that they were suspects in the Musando murder? I mean, that story was just crazy. Now, interestingly, the police later recanted that story, Yeah, they later withdrew that story and explained that there was a misunderstanding, in quotes, misunderstanding, that actually what had happened is that they were linked to another murder in Kenya. Anyway, let's leave, just chew on that. That is probably for another day. Here we're dealing with the elections. Okay, back to the servers. So obviously the people put some certain instructions in the server, and that is why the servers gave us very constant results. Now, it's just common sense. If you're expecting results from various polling stations at random from all over the country, what kind of trend would you expect? You'd expect something like a seesaw, right? Yeah. At one point, another candidate is leading. At another point, another candidate is leading. Another point, the candidate who was leading stays in the lead for 2-3 poll stations. Then there's a bit of catching up. You know, something that would look normal. Now, the kind of results that was streaming in from the IEBC site were constant. The difference between the two candidates was constant in terms of percentage. Yeah, from 300,000 to 1 million, it was very constant. Yes. Now, those were clearly machine results. And not only that, we have now had statisticians and mathematicians tell us actually, if you looked at those results and did a mathematical formula, you'll be able to get one candidate's results from the number that was listed as the other candidate's results. Okay? And then last but not least, I believe it was deliberate that we're not being told where these results were coming from. Yeah? So that if you hear that such and such a candidate has gotten so many votes against such a candidate, you have no idea where they've come from. They could be coming from maybe a particular candidate's stronghold, and he appears to have a weak performance in that particular constituency. Yeah, wouldn't you pose questions? And I think this was the issue. Somebody did not want anybody to pose questions. So numbers were just thrown at us. Numbers. Yeah? Anyway. Now, another thing that made these results very strange is, and I said this in an earlier recording, they did not tally with actually what was on the ground. Okay? Now, for instance, you have a particular presidential candidate go to a particular area of the country. They are booed. People don't listen to what they're saying. Blah blah blah, and then that candidate comes back and wins that particular constituency or county. Now, wouldn't that raise a few questions? Yeah. Actually, them winning the county, maybe if they came second, or maybe if they performed better than expectation, and I'm coming to that in a minute. Yeah. But very strange results indeed. Very strange. Yeah. More evidence that these were cooked results. Now, I've already indicated in an earlier recording that I made that when somebody asked me, does the fiddling of the presidential elections affect the other positions like MCA, the women's rep, member of parliament, senator, governor, and so on and so forth? My answer was yes, it affects. Okay? And I explained why it affects. You see, where we have reached as far as rigging is concerned, you cannot just give the president 5 votes. Yeah? You will need to spread it out. If you give him 5 votes, you need to give 5 votes to all the other candidates. Why? Because we have had cases in the past of rigging whereby later, as the court investigates, if you find that a particular presidential candidate got 40,000 votes in a certain constituency, and then those 40,000 votes were nowhere to be seen for MP and the other seats, meaning that 40,000 people walked into that polling station, and they're local people, by the way, had no interest in voting for the MP, had no interest in voting for any other seat, and they just voted for the president and walked out. Okay, so to avoid this, obviously, where rigging has reached, you would want to spread the votes down, meaning that those results, the whole election results, as far as this electronically cooked results, and as far as planted results, affected the entire election. So the entire election was stolen. Okay? And this is beginning to come out with various candidates, quite rightly so. And I'll give you a good example. In Meru, Governor Munya, the incumbent, has rejected the results. And he has said there's no way Kiraitu Murungi would have defeated him. Okay? Now, politicians say a lot of things. We know politicians are opportunists. If they see an opportunity, a gap, to be able to retrieve an election that is lost, they will take it. However, we all know what has been happening in Meru. Meru people know what has been happening in their county. And they will tell you categorically, there's no way Bwana Murungi would have won these elections. But here is a possible answer to this mess. As I've told you before, when you plant votes for the top seats, you also need to spread them down. Now, obviously, if you're the NASA candidate, just a hypothetical example, if you're the NASA candidate for president in Meru, and you stole the votes, you would need to make sure that you give the other votes to NASA people down the line. And this would explain why Bwana Murungi had a very shocking and unexpected win over Governor Munya. So yes, presidential fiddling of votes affects all the other seats, as we have clearly, and I'm sure as the days go by, we will see very many examples from many other parts of the country. Which brings me to the last point, and very important point, in that the fiddling appears to have been two-pronged. That is, apart from the electronic, which you all saw clearly, there are also reports from all over the country of ballot boxes that arrived already with the votes inside. Now, I'll give a very good example, and we reported this in this channel. In Lamu, the NASA person there reported very early in the morning, before we even knew how the day was going to go, before we knew what was going to happen with this election, he reported that ballot boxes had already come with the votes of a particular presidential candidate. Okay? Now, let me take you back to the year 1992. President Moi was involved in the very first competitive presidential elections in the country, and I was in a constituency called Dagoretti. Now in Dagoretti constituency, the man of the hour, the man of those elections was a man called Clement Gashanja. Some of you older people might remember that candidate. He was standing for MP, and he won those elections by a huge vote margin. However, what shocked a lot of us very keen observers when we saw the results for Dagoretti was that we noticed that the presidential candidate there won. Yes, it was Kenneth Matiba. He got almost 100,000 votes. I can't quite remember the number, but it was a sizable amount of votes. But what really surprised us was the votes Moi got in the constituency. Now, Dagoretti is not a very big constituency. It's very close-knit. Everybody knows everybody else. And we realized that when the results came out, that President Moi, I'll never forget that figure, President Moi had actually gotten 6,000 votes. Now, for an area which was House of Mumbi, very anti-Moi, with very few people from other communities. Yes, that's how it was at the time, because I used to live there. I lived there for years. 6,000 votes for Moi was too much. Okay? Now, back to the present. Now, at that time, we noticed one thing, what came out very clearly. The way Moi used to rig his elections was that he'd ensure that he would not win in a certain constituency, but he would get a reasonable amount of votes, not too much as to arouse suspicion, but a reasonable amount of votes that nobody would notice, because everybody would just want to hear who won, so and so on, and the gap is so big, and they're happy, and that's the end of it. Not noticing that these votes which have been added are careful mathematical calculations, and these votes add up. 6,000 here, 6,000 there, 4,000, 2,000. At the end of the day, Moi got his votes, and he was re-elected. Now, in this particular election, one of the amazing things which has come up is how the president has managed to get a sizable amount of votes in key opposition areas. That one is a mystery. Okay, and this story I've told you about what happened in Dagoretti years ago in 1992. Many of you are not even born. Okay, could hold the key to explaining that mystery. Now, I hope this recording has shed a bit more light on the shocking information that's unraveling about how the election was stolen, and I hope it will help us to understand what may have happened a little more clearly. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.